Hello and welcome back to Lessons in Attachment. I am so thankful, so grateful that you're here. I've been getting so many messages in my DMs. It's definitely blown up recently, from you guys loving the podcast, and it just literally warms my heart. So I had to start this episode just expressing that feeling, that gratitude, and absorbing it myself. I'm dedicated to supporting you to move from anxious to secure. And this podcast is one of those ways of supporting you to do that. And today I'm really excited to share with you a snippet from a recent mini workshop that we had inside the attachment recovery gym with one of my good friends, I would say now, the self-worth therapist, Nicola. She supported us to get in touch with that inner child, that younger part of us that we need to connect with in order to heal. Nicola is someone that we've had the pleasure of welcoming into the attachment recovery gym, not just once, but twice. Her work has resonated with our members. Her work has resonated with me, especially when it comes to healing your inner child and really understanding the impact of our past and how that impacts us today. If you are someone who struggles with insecure attachment, you know, meeting people, loving people, healing your inner child, then meeting, loving, and healing your inner child can be one of the most profound steps that you can take in your recovery. I really believe in that. Like, I really believe it. That younger part of you is often carrying so much pain, so much fear, and that there's so many unmet needs for this part, and it comes out when we're triggered. It comes out in those moments where you feel that childlike emotion come up, and it impacts our well-being today, our mental health today, how we show up in adult relationships today. And when you reconnect with your inner child, you're not only healing those past wounds, you're rewriting how things are going to play out for you today. You're giving yourself another chance. You're supporting yourself to be able to self-soothe in those moments, because when we do this work, we don't get into that childlike state so much. We know how to support ourselves through that anxious part. This kind of work has so many benefits. When you are working with your inner child, it can help soften self-criticism. Think of the impact that it has on your mood, on your day, the way that you criticize yourself. Think about that impact. This work will boost your self-worth. For every part of you that criticizes, there is part of you being criticized. And usually the part being criticized is that younger part. And we need to heal that. We need to offer that part love, not criticism. So, I mean, and so many other things, but the main thing, I guess, what you guys are looking for is inner child work can really help us to move from anxious to secure. In the clip that I'm going to share with you today, you're going to hear Nicola, the self-worth therapist. Absolutely adore her so much. I just love that she comes into the membership and supports our members. I'm going to share 3 key principles that she shared with us in a recent mini workshop of inner child work. So 3 key principles of inner child work that she shared with us that will help you start reconnecting with your younger self, your younger part, your inner child, whatever you prefer to call it. I loved this myself. It was like a personal therapy session for me. I don't think you hear that. No, you don't hear that. It was the question. So if you're a member of the Attachment Recovery Gym, if you search inner child workshop, self-worth and inner child workshop, you will see this 30-minute workshop by Nicola. And there's other sections to this as well. She goes through some incredible questions that you will ask yourself in like a kind of a quick fire round. It was really powerful, actually. You will see me participating. We did it live together. It's really cool. But if you're not in the membership. Obviously, you can join, but also I'm hoping that these three key principles that you're going to hear today are also really powerful for you. Someone that watched that 30-minute mini workshop, they literally said, DM'd me on Instagram, carly.ann_, if you don't follow me. She said, "Oh my God, I just did the inner child work. Love the small episode. And in the 14 questions, I realized my inner child was so negative and felt so unloved and unmotivated. This is probably a reason into why I have dragged that into my adult life and the trauma I have been through." She went on to kind of say some other things I'm not going to share actually. I feel like that's kind of part of her personal story. But basically really noting that maybe she noticed that a lot of self-love had been missing, that she had these new ideas now of how to treat herself, how to speak to herself. And she shared some really beautiful examples where she can start with that. And that's just part of the feedback, but I feel like the rest of it is actually a bit personal, so I'm going to leave it there. But I feel like even just that part of the message really captures exactly why this work matters. It's not just about reflecting on the past, it's also in recognizing how we got to where we are today. Okay, let's dive into this clip and explore these three powerful keys to inner child healing.
So, I think these are three of the most important things to think about when we are doing inner child work. And I love making everything simple, so I just went with three C's here. So we've got number one, which is connection. So this is all about getting to know your inner child and building a connection with them. This can be like a spoken dialogue. Like sometimes I literally talk to myself out loud if I feel triggered. I'll be like, okay, what's going on for you? How are you? Like, what are you feeling? It can be a written thing, so you can do this in a journal, or it can just be like in your mind as well. So connection is all about basically just starting that dialogue with them, starting to get to know them a little bit. It could be asking questions about what their needs are, what their desires are. It could be a conversation around, oh, remember when we did that thing when we were little? How cool was that? Like, what did you like about that? It's literally like finding out about them. It's like imagine you're just having a conversation with someone you've just met and you're like asking them about themselves, like what do they enjoy? Like how do they feel about certain things? What do they think about certain things? I will say, sometimes this can be quite difficult, especially if you have been through childhood trauma. Some people can't remember a lot of things. I know that was my case. Like I find it very hard to remember from a certain age. So what can help with that is having a picture of yourself. I know what I did is had a picture of little me on my screensaver on my phone. I had that on for about a year just to kind of build that connection a little bit. Or you can just put a picture up in your house, something like that. Or it could just be looking at old, family photos, things like that, and maybe looking at those and for memories and thinking, oh, yeah, I did that because I can see the photos of it. Um, but yeah, just think of this as, a way that you start to have that connection with that inner child and like find out a bit more about them basically. And the exercise we're going to do in a little bit will really help with that as well.
Can I
Um,
ask a
yeah.
question?
hmm
Did you find, and it's personal, so I guess generalized as well, but
hmm
begin to have that connection and make the time for that, do you find that sometimes memories can come back?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I think sometimes it is that maybe they don't feel safe to share those as well. When I did have that screensaver, I felt so, so connected to her, so to the point I'm like, should I just keep that forever? Because, having that connection with your inner child, it starts to build that safety between you and them. And it really helps, like when you're triggered and things like that, to recognize where it's coming from. Um, yeah, so I think it did start to open up that conversation so memories would come back and I started to remember more. Like I was going through therapy at the time as well, so I'm not sure if it was that, but I think just having that connection, yeah, it definitely brought some things back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go on the second one. So the second one is compassion. So this is about being a loving adult to your inner child and building that trust again with them. This is all about building trust, you'll probably recognize. So this is about kind of reparenting. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. So it's being that loving parent to yourself. So think about if a child was triggered, kind of maybe going through a tantrum, like what would you do? Would you dismiss them? Would you shame them? Would you think they're bad? Or would you offer them compassion, encouragement, hold space for them, find out what's going on? And this is what this is about because a lot of people will think that their inner critic is this kind of mean voice and they'll try and quiet their inner critic. But often our inner critic is that scared younger part of us who is just trying to do something because it feels scared. And usually it's using words from the people who put expectations on the inner child. So it will say things like, I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe when I went live on Instagram for the first time, my inner critic, so my scared inner child was like, what are you doing? We can't do that. We're putting ourselves out there. Like all of this kind of stuff. But how I worked with that was to be that loving adult to that inner child, offering reassurance in, it's okay, it's not going to be the end of the world. People do want to hear from us. People do love what we've got to say. So that's kind of an example as how you work with your inner child and show them that love and compassion. And that really does start to build trust with them. I always use the phrase, what we resist persists. So if we don't listen to what that inner child is trying to communicate with us and offer them that validation, like, yes, it is scary, but we're going to be okay, that's when they start to build trust with you and they maybe don't get as triggered as much because they start to trust that actually what you're saying is true and that it's not going to be the end of the world. So obviously when I went and did that live and it wasn't the end of the world and people liked it, that inner child starts to go, oh, maybe she's got something going on there. Maybe she's right with this one and just the more you can do that, the more your inner child starts to trust in you and your decisions. And maybe that I guess those triggers start to lessen a little bit because they start to trust in what you want to do. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So much sense.
So I'm just checking on the time because I know we've only got. So the last one is creativity. And this is quite an obvious one in a way because like this is all about play and I guess children love play. So this is just a really good way again to build trust with your inner child and this is what can help the child just feel a lot more relaxed, a lot more regulated, a lot more safe. If you can add more creativity and play into your life, that's going to really build that connection with your inner child as well. Um, we can never be creative and play if we are in a survival state, so in a state of fight or flight. So the more you can do this, the more you're going to be in that regulated state. And again, the more your inner child's just going to start trusting you. Also, it can in the sense like if the inner child is a little bit triggered, you can like talk to them and say like, what would you like? Like, for example, it might be like, okay, how about if we do this and then we go do some coloring? Or what would make this activity feel better for you? What about if we had a hot chocolate when we do the live? Would that like make you feel better? So it's like working with them, like what would make you feel more at ease? So for this one, just have a think about like what things did you love doing as a child? What creative what creativity could you bring into your week a little bit more? It could be, when you're cooking, can you just like be a bit more creative with it? It could just be coloring. I absolutely love coloring. I've got some really nice pens recently. Could be puzzles, anything really. I love creating content. I find that really nice as well. Just yeah, anything that you can do like that and just creating space for your inner child just to have fun basically. So yeah.
Can I do a couple of shares?
Mhm.
Um, I can't remember the second one. The first one that came to, oh yeah, I can remember it. So I had a client recently, and I guess I'm just feeling a little bit validated from what you just said, because she was saying how suspicious she is of
Okay.
people she dates. And
Right.
in the same exercise, she said, I really value, was it like fun and play or something like joy and fun with the
Hmm.
person. And it was that, it was like, okay, well, we've got to look at that then, because what you value is play and fun and joy
Yeah.
in this state of suspicion and mistrust with someone, it's going to be really hard, right, to shift states into like that social fun, joy. And I was given examples as well in a separate place of if I'm even a little bit stressed, a little bit triggered, like
Hmm.
even I can tell because when I'm walking down the street, if I, because now that I've got a baby, you know, people say
Hmm.
good morning to me. People smile at me a lot and say hello. And I can tell like my kind of level of openness and triggered and stressed because of how much I'm willing to set like engage in the morning. Like if I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, hi, good morning, I'm like, oh yeah, I must be in a good mood. But if I'm a bit like, yeah, I'm like, oh, I must be a bit like,
Yeah, and that's a good way like to check in with yourself and realize like I always know like if I'm overthinking social media content, I need to go and relax and play and do some coloring. I don't need to try and like create more. I need to relax because I'm starting to go in that fight or flight where I'm like trying to force and push things, whereas actually you need to do the opposite sometimes.
interesting. Okay, I needed to hear that. And then the last thing I'm going to say, um, relating to your compassion, is again on one of my courses, I showed a picture of Millie. Obviously, my whole world is Millie right now.
Yeah.
Showed a picture of her and said, "So who thinks that she's not good enough?" And
Mm,
obviously, everyone was like, "Absolutely, like, what are you on about? Absolutely not." And I was like,
yeah.
"What? How? How do we?" When at what point do we stop loving ourselves and judge ourselves? And we would never, I mean, we wouldn't even with a baby, but we wouldn't with each other.
No, and I think that's what it is. Like, when we have this critical voice that everyone says, that is like a scared inner child. And would you say they're bad and try and quiet them, shut them up, or would you actually find out what's going on? Like why they're hurting, why they're triggered, and actually try to soothe, comfort them?
And
Yeah.
this girl who, let me tell you, she screams, she cries, she's a bit unreasonable. And I still think she's really worthy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it is, it's about being that
Very
pet
neat.
and sin. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that you use that as such a good example. Okay, she'll go on the next little bit.
Yeah, we won't
15
have time for
minutes. So, this is the exercise that we're going to do, and it's only going to take probably less than 5 minutes.